Welcome to the Explainer. So let's jump right in. We're going to explore this really powerful idea that American society isn't defined by everyone agreeing, but by the constant, big arguments we have over fundamental ideas. And these aren't just little squabbles. They're foundational battles over the rules, the economy, and who we are as a nation. And this idea, well, it gets right to the very heart of the American experiment. From the get-go, the nation's foundational document, the Constitution, was seen by some people not as this sacred, unchangeable text, but as a living document, a blueprint that future generations should feel free to change to fit their own times. And look, these battles aren't just philosophical debates. They involve absolutely monumental questions of economic survival and the government's role in it all. This number, $700 billion, that represents just one single intervention, the TARP bailout in 2008. That was a moment when the entire financial system was teetering on the edge, forcing a huge national debate about who gets rescued, who's responsible, and what the real cost of failure is. Ultimately, these arguments touch the very core of our identity. They make us ask some of the most fundamental questions, right? Like, who gets to serve this country? Whose voice actually matters in an election? Who is really included in the American promise? And these aren't abstract questions. They shape real lives and define the character of the nation. So let's start where it all begins, the original battleground, the Constitution itself. This document doesn't just set up a government, it lays out the rules for every single fight that comes after. You see, the framers made it incredibly difficult to change the rules. They designed this very deliberate two-step process to formally change the Constitution. First, you've got to get a supermajority in Congress. Then, you need an even wider agreement across the states. It's a high bar, and that was totally by design. And what's the result of that high bar? Well, think about it. In over 230 years, the Constitution has been amended only 27 times. And that number, it tells a huge story. It means the American blueprint is stable, but it's not frozen in time. Because making official changes is so hard, it forces the biggest arguments to play out elsewhere. In the courts, at the ballot box, and right in the middle of our culture. Change can happen, but it takes a truly overwhelming national agreement. Okay, now let's jump forward to a much more recent and, frankly, much more chaotic battleground, the fight for the economy during the 2008 financial crisis. Here, the arguments weren't about tweaking the Constitution. They were about stopping the entire system from completely collapsing. So, to really get what happened in the crisis, you have to wrap your head around this one thing: mortgage-backed securities. Just imagine taking thousands of home loans, some good, some pretty risky, bundling them all together and then selling that bundle off like it's a stock. Investors bought these things thinking they were safe, but when that housing bubble burst and homeowners couldn't pay, bam, these securities became worthless almost overnight, and they dragged huge investment firms down with them. The speed of this thing was just staggering. It was terrifying. In just a matter of weeks, the bedrock of the financial world just crumbled. The U.S. government seizes the biggest mortgage lenders, a Wall Street giant just vanishes overnight, and the world's largest insurer needs a massive rescue. This wasn't some slow decline, folks. It was a complete freefall that forced the government to step in an unprecedented way. But the fight isn't always on Wall Street. Sometimes it moves into really deeply personal territory. Some of the most intense battles we have aren't about money at all. They're about identity, they're about rights, and who gets to be a full participant in American life. And this battle for belonging, it's fought on so many different fronts at the same time. On one hand, you've got this fundamental fight over the right to serve your own country in the military. And on the other, you have this fight for pure political power, right? As the Hispanic vote grows, it's totally reshaping the election map and forcing both parties to fight for their support. And this number, 13,000, it represents the very real human cost of that don't ask, don't tell policy. I mean, this isn't just a statistic. We're talking about over 13,000 trained, dedicated service members who were kicked out of the military just for who they were. It's a really stark reminder of the real-world consequences of these policy battles. The 2008 election, wow, it really showed the massive impact of a changing country. You can see here the Hispanic voting bloc went heavily for Barack Obama, and that helped him win key states like Florida, Nevada, and Colorado. This was really the moment that people started talking about the sleeping giant of the Hispanic vote being wide awake, a group that is now absolutely critical to winning the presidency. So that brings us to the next question. What are the battlegrounds that are going to define the next generation? Well, they're the fights that are happening right now, where technology, health, ethics, and just enormous costs are all colliding. This is the big question, isn't it? What does the future cost? From the incredible, almost sci-fi possibilities of genetic tech to the staggering multi-trillion-dollar promises we've made with our entitlement programs, every single decision about our future has a price tag and a choice to make. Genetic technology is a perfect example of a modern battleground. The promise is just incredible, right? The ability to spot and prevent diseases before they even start. But the danger, the peril, is just as real. What if this super personal info could be used against you by employers or insurance companies? It's forcing us to deal with brand new ethical problems we've never had to think about before. And one of the biggest fights for the future is already here: Medicare. It's this core promise we've made to millions of American seniors, but it's on a path that just isn't sustainable. Basically, with more people getting older and healthcare costs going up, the money going out in benefits is starting to be more than the money coming in from taxes. It's a looming crisis that's going to force a really tough, painful national conversation about taxes, benefits, and the promises we can actually afford to keep. Okay, so what happens when you take all these different battlegrounds, the Constitution, the economy, our identity, and you put them all together? What bigger truth does it tell us about the American system itself? And we land right back where we started. This constant arguing, this conflict, it isn't a bug in the system. It's the main feature. The founders actually built a system that makes change hard, but not impossible. They designed it for debate, for argument, for slow evolution, because they believed that was the only way the country could actually survive and adapt over time. And that leaves us with one final thought. We've looked at the battles over the economy, over who we are, and over what's next. We've seen this whole pattern of conflict and change. So the real question for all of us now is, what are the great debates, the huge arguments that are going to define America's next chapter?